Hello, everyone. This is Justin Cobb coming to you from Arlington, Virginia. Welcome to another episode of Insights. Today, I have with us a wonderful guest. His name is Dr. Chris Jeffords. Chris, I'll be full honest and transparent with you folks. I actually took one of his classes back when I was in my undergrad, and I'm so grateful that he remained connected with me all these years later. But here's the incredible thing about Chris. The fact that he is an economics professor is really profound. He's based out in the greater Philadelphia area, and he teaches at Villanova University. But his economics specialty is it's even though it is interdisciplinary, he has a sincere focus in environmentalism. His previous work has analyzed, for instance, the kinds of ramifications that constitutional protections for the environment have on the economy, among other beautiful things. Chris, I'm so excited to have you on board today. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Justin, for having me here. It's great to see you. It's been a long time, couple of years at least 5 or 6 years, I'm sure, more than that. But it's really great to be here. Thanks for having me. And that was a really nice introduction. I appreciate it.
Of
and
course.
It's nice to see everybody in the audience out there. How you doing?
Fantastic. Yes. So let's go ahead and segue to the questions, Chris, because one of the things I always love to start with is I want to know more about your origins. Because let's be honest, a lot of what we end up doing, or a lot of our ways of approaching things, it comes from a background. It comes from where we grow up at. So tell me more about what it was like for a young Chris. What were you growing up and experiencing?
Yeah, of course. That's a good question. Just want to note, like, if I look away for a second, I just taken a little note so I can remember, keep myself on track here. So growing up, I grew up in New York, Long Island, New York. New Yorker. I lived there for 20 some years. I grew up. I have an older brother who's about 4.5 years older than me. We grew up in a small town called East Meadow or Westbury, depending on how you look at the cut up of the township. And I grew up with pets all the time. I always had dogs, chocolate labs, yellow labs. My mother is a full-blown hippie, Woodstock style hippie. Went to Woodstock. I went to all that stuff. Every time we would go on vacation every year, it'd be up to the Catskill Mountains, and she'd take us to Socrates and Woodstock and walk us through the fields in the town and tell us about it. And then my father was kind of the opposite in some ways. He was a Vietnam vet. He was in the Navy. He was a medic in the Navy for a long time. And then he came out and he was an ER nurse for a really long time. So he had a background in nursing, and then he went into admin. And my mother, so he went to college and then master's degree. And my mother didn't go to college at all. She came back. She was just around. She just bopped around for a long time doing her thing, being a true hippie. And she then went to, I want to say it was like dental assistant school. And then she was a dental assistant for forever, basically, until she then just segued into like office management, while my father did admin as nursing admin for a bunch of hospital systems on Long Island. So growing up, it was a lot of that. We would always vacation in the mountains, like Catskill, upstate New York, outside of Long Island, because there's nature on Long Island, but there's not a ton of it unless you drive out east, and we've always seen that anyway. So we go up to the Catskills to a place called Winter Clove, the Winter Clove Inn, which is basically like an old school bed and breakfast. The rooms did not have televisions in them. There was a central TV in the building. If you wanted to go watch TV, you had to go watch with everybody else, like communally. And it was just like, family style breakfast, family style dinner, kind of like a big bed and breakfast, but everything was on the compound or the campus, if you will, the property. So that was it. I mean, grew up playing a lot of video games. Loved Nintendo. Had the original Nintendo and every Nintendo system thereafter. Still have my Nintendo Switch, Nintendo Wii now that I play with my kids. Although they have an Xbox now too, so it's a little bit of a split there for us. I'm not sure how far down the rabbit hole you're looking to go there, but that's kind of me growing up, and then college, of course.
So here's the question I'm curious about, because let's look at the reality. You're an economics professor. No one wakes
Hmm.
up. At least I know I didn't wake up. I can't speak for anyone else, but no one wakes up and says, "Oh, I'm going to be an economics professor. That's what I want to be." Give me a sense of that journey that led you up to studying economics and really deciding, "Hey, I want to not just do this for my living, but I'm going to teach it to folks." I'm curious.
Yeah, I guess subconsciously, I think the way that my parents were impacted my interests in like environmental stuff, and then just kind of going to the mountains. I don't think I thought about it at the time, but that impacted my interest in the environmental stuff. But then when I went to Hofstra University as an undergrad, which is also on Long Island, and I really had no idea, no clue. Like, hey, I'm in college, let's take some classes, right? So I went to college, started taking classes. I was like, all right, I'll take some business classes, right? Not really having a true sense of who I was or what was going on. Let's take some business classes. So I did that and just absolutely did not enjoy some of what I was getting. There was none of I wasn't getting enough of like why the decisions were happening, why we were coming up with these numbers, why the accounting processes looked like this. I wanted to know more about like the human side of where these numbers were coming from, especially when I ran through the accounting class. No hate on my accounting colleagues these days, but it wasn't for me. I took those classes and I just really didn't enjoy not hearing about why people were making choices and how people fit into these equations. So then I took an econ class or took an econ class or two, because it was part of the curriculum anyway, like micro macro, like you would have seen at IUP, of course. And I wound up having a professor who came to Hofstra from Stanford University by way of, I think he went to Stanford, worked at George Mason University for a while, had a sort of adjunct spot at Columbia University for a while, and just had a really interesting heterodox background and approach to econ. And he was really young. He was like in his early 20s. Like he was just fresh out of college, coming for his first job. And he was really easy to relate to and talk to and explained economics really well. And I think like after having him in class, comparing it back to those business classes I was taking, I just realized that I really liked econ a lot. I started to think I wanted to teach economics while I was at Hofstra. And to teach economics really means you have to teach it at the college level, because there's no, at least in the States, there's no high school economics curriculum, which I think there should be, but there is no high school econ curriculum. It's like I had, like the history teacher or the business teacher taught the economics elective, right? And then it was just kind of like a split, or you could take like an AP class if you wanted to. It wasn't required stuff. So then I wanted to teach econ, so I had to go back to get all of the degrees to be able to teach full time, to have like a full time secure job at a college or university teaching economics.
And one of the things that I admire about this is the fact that, one, you are training the next generation of economists, these people who are going in. They're not just running numbers. No, and again, like you said, no hate to accounting. Like accounting, I'm not trying to hate on you, but you're not just running numbers in this regard. You're finding out the stories behind these numbers. You're getting a sense of, okay, when these numbers span out and we see them ripple into the world, these are the real world implications that they have. And I loved how you tied in the fact that you had this appreciation for the environment that since you were a kid, and that kind of segues into why you're even in studying the environmental impacts of these economics. But I'm curious then, what were some of the because you talked about how you didn't really have a sense of what you were trying to do when you went into university, but can you give me a sense of some of the challenges you were having and like navigating your career? Because
Yeah.
it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds as if you were just struggling with finding yourself in all of this.
Yeah, no, that is definitely true. I was like in my early 20, I graduated high school in 2000, and then, off to college, and I graduated in 2004. So, by the time I came out, I knew I loved economics, and I knew I wanted to teach it. And then I also knew that in order to do that would require me doing a whole bunch of other things that I really hadn't prepped too well for. Like, I didn't think about it. Like, I needed a lot more math to be able to go to grad school in econ, and I just didn't have a lot. I think I stopped at like Calc 1 or something in undergrad, so I had to do a bunch of catch up there. So to get from Hofstra to grad school, to kind of think about how it, from Hofstra, then I went to SUNY Albany for a year. I took a little time off, but I went to SUNY Albany for a master's degree. And then I worked in the private sector for a little while before I went back to UConn. So the University of Connecticut, well, not back to it, first time there for my PhD. So all kind of in there, I wasn't really sure, like, all right, I was just building tools. Like from Hofstra to get to UConn, I was collecting tools. Like I went to SUNY Albany to get more math background. Like I had to do a terminal master's degree because I just needed more math and quant background to get the hurdle to grad school, to a PhD. And then in between that, I wanted to get some work experience because I still wasn't entirely sure. Like, I know I could teach with a master's, but it's not, you're adjunct and it's uncertain. Like you could a semester here, a semester there, you're not guaranteed, you're a low person on the totem pole. So when you think about that particular context, then I went to work full time to kind of see, like, I still wasn't sure, like, all right, do I really want to go back? Do I just want to teach with a master's? Let me see if I like working full time. And I didn't. I went to work like full time, 40 hours, 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week, doing machinery inventory and equipment appraisal, like an appraisal business. So bank, like a bridge loan for a company that needed a loan against their inventory, right? And so I did that. I sat in a cubicle for hours on end, no windows, fluorescent lights, just, coffee, just grinding out the like staring at Excel, typing away on like 3 monitors. And I was like, I cannot do this forever. I still really love econ and I wasn't doing it. I'm like, where's my econ? Like, I'm just crunching numbers here. I went all this econ and I'm back to just doing number stuff. So that experience is really cool. It's helpful because I can talk about it in the classroom now, but I didn't like it a lot. And I also tell my students that, like, it wasn't for me. Like, it might be for you, but it was not for me. And then so I value the freedom of my time a little bit. Like, just, it's really high on my list. Like, I'll sacrifice salary money to have just freedom of time and schedule. So I went back to so then I went to UConn, and still I was like, I love econ. Not really sure. Didn't make that connection, like you said before, back to my environmental sort of, my love of like the environmental stuff as a kid or growing up. Like, still the connection wasn't there. Like, it wasn't like, oh, let me connect these things. I love environment. Let me go do environmental econ. It wasn't until UConn that I really got into that. And that was because, again, just people in my life having really strong, positive, profound influence. Like there was a program at UConn that was interdisciplinary. They invited faculty from all across the campus, all walks of life. They invited grad students, which I was at the time. I'm still a member of this group. It's the Economic and Social Rights group. It's got political scientists, economists were the minority in the group, anthropologists, sociologists, grad students from every kind of department, philosophy, ethics, you name it. And people were just working on different kinds of rights. And it wasn't until I got in there and there was a person there who was working on environmental rights from a political science perspective that I was like something just finally clicked in my mind. I was like, oh, I can do this. Like, I really do like the environment. I like econ. Why haven't I thought about this earlier? And then once I did that, it just kind of set the ball rolling, I think, in a positive direction for me, at least to stop floundering around. And I'm not saying grad school, like, it was like, click, here I am. Like, there was a lot of issues in grad school. Like, I am not good at standardized tests. I am not good at time bomb tests. I am horrible at all of these things. So there were failed exams, failed comps, just a slew of downhill like hurdles, and then life issues we can talk about too. But that's kind of the.
Yeah, it sounds to me, if I'm hearing you correctly, that this floundering that was going on, you were going through, we all go through points like this. And I just want to make that clear for audiences. If you are going through a period of your life where you really do not know what it is you're supposed to be doing, it is okay. You're going to find the answer. And chances are you're going to have a few bumps and hurdles to get to that journey. It's a part of the process. But I loved, Chris, of what you talked about in the sense of you ended up in a community, and this community actually inspired you and helped you find a sense of purpose for the work that you wanted to do. Here it was, you were grinding out, like using your words, you're grinding without no windows, which is, even just hearing that part of it, I felt all the dread for you in that moment.
No windows.
But
They're
and
important. Windows are important.
yeah, windows are important, folks. But we let's talk about the fact that this community really helped you hone in that regard. So walk me through, because you mentioned this political scientist that you were connected with in that group. But like,
Mhm.
can you give me a sense of how that journey ended up leading you into the studying the environmental associations with the economy? Because this is something that a lot of people, I feel like, especially when I was learning about some of this as well. This is where a lot of the disconnect is happening, isn't it? In our sustainability efforts, not just in sustainability, but in our restoration. A lot of it is a concern about bottom line. A lot of it is concern about who is going to profit and benefits. And a lot of people think that you can either have one or the other, but uh,
Right.
it's a lot more complicated than that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it's really complicated. There are there's two really big schools of thought, and then like so many other things you could consider here. And the two primary schools of thought kind of split in the 70s. So econ's been around for a while, like just people thinking about econ, formal writing about econ in the 1700s, et cetera. So we move forward, span a couple hundred years, right? And in the 1970s is when we get a bunch of sustainability efforts on Earth and interdisciplinary environmental efforts and all these things going on. And then there's a split in econ into these two kind of subfields that have kind of come back together in present day, but for a long time we're really at odds with each other. And the splits were between kind of just be pedestrian about it, environmental economics and ecological economics, right? And what you were mentioning leading up to this answer here in your question was, I believe, the environmental econ approach, which is to say that the environment is part of the economy, right? And so we use the environment to meet economic goals and needs and ends. And sometimes that might mean really sacrificing in a hardcore way environmental amenities, both real and unseen. And then the ecological econ folks kind of turned it around a little bit and said, no, look, the economy is part of the environment. And so when we address policy, when we try to deal with economic issues, the environment, ecological ecosystem services, these things come first, and the economy can be kind of slowed down or, hurt in a way, in one perspective, for the sake of the environment. So build up the economy, environment be damned, build up the environment, economy be damned was the split. I fall more, I know both fields pretty well because I like to know, I don't want to say that, this might sound weird, but I like to know my enemy, if you will. Like it's easy. Like I like to know what both fields are up to so that I can have a good sense when I'm just having informal conversations with students and other folks to be like, hey, this isn't the only view. You should also consider this, because when you have a sense of what's going on in another field, you can then inform your own view. So I did that. Like the split for me, it was easy for me to fit into that ecological econ field or frame of mind, just given that I connected with that group, because the political scientists, the anthropologists, the sociologists, all these other folks that were in that group, and then my advisor in the econ department was part of that group too, all just kind of thought about, they're already thinking about human rights issues, economic rights, cultural rights, social rights, of course, civil and political rights, but these sort of newer rights. And so they already had a predisposition, you might call it a bias, towards the sort of framework where rights are really important. We have to think about these things primarily before we think about economic issues. Like the economy doesn't matter if you don't have basic subsistence and security rights. Like who cares about if you can go to work, if you can't even get water or food to move, right? Like to get to work, or if you don't have physical security to leave your house to go to work. So there was a lot of that, and it really jived for me. And then I just was working on econ. There are environmental economics and natural resource economics classes in the ag econ and econ department at UConn. There's kind of like a connection between the two departments. And I was taking those, and it was kind of just as I was doing that, I was starting to realize like, hey, there's a lot of room here to start connecting these interdisciplinary rights issues to economics. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. And then luckily there were, I don't know if those people weren't at UConn at the time, I'm not sure what, I might have just been a macroeconomist. I had no idea. Like if that didn't happen the way that it did happen, I have no idea like what type of economist that would be. Like it was so foundational to me, moving from just pure mainstream econ stuff to the heterodox brand of econ to the type that I think about today. Just, everything's sustainability for me. And I just use economics to think about sustainability.
A lot of what I'm hearing in that answer is about balance. And that is one of the most difficult things to achieve in any sort of discourse, in the sense of we need to have this concern for the well-being of others and ourselves. We also need to have that foresight in order to think about how our current activities are going to not only impact us, but future generations down the line. But in terms of the environment, what kind of world are we going to be leaving behind if we pursue this course of action? I mean, it's sad to say, but look at what's going on in the world right now. People were warning us since the 70s, and even before then, since the 1800s, that if we go down this route the way that we did, future generations are going to witness a climactic, literally and metaphorically, climactic circumstances. And those instances are not happening in the future. They're happening now as we speak. All these famines that are happening all over the globe that are pushing migrants out of these places, all of these droughts, all of these natural disasters that, I mean, look at what happened with North Carolina. If we want to have a sustainable, flourishing society and planet, we have to learn and grasp how do policies and procedures impact the overall big picture that we're trying to build.
Yeah, that's definitely true. No, you were spot on. I did a whole bunch of research. I kind of started when I was at UConn, looking at more so the effects of like national constitutions, because the data for national pollution levels is easier to get your hands on than the data at state level. Because in the US, of course, 50 states, we don't really track, or didn't at the time very well track, like pollution by state. And so although like I have done some research looking at Pennsylvania and New York specifically, like thinking about the comparisons there, more so at the national scale. And so the idea there, like you pointed out, is that constitutions have environmental rights provisions in them. And in particular, I focused on the environmental human rights ones, because some constitutions will have rights in them that are specifically that nature has rights, which is, interesting in and of itself, but different from human rights. You can derive one from the other, I suppose, and interesting sort of tangent there. But human rights, right? So the idea that everyone has the right to clean air or clean water. And Pennsylvania's constitution is a great example of one that's written really nicely and cleanly, and it's been around, which surprises people, since 1970, that Pennsylvania's had this thing in their constitution. But it historically has not been used to do anything other than adjudicate like land use disputes until like fracking started happening in a widespread scale in Pennsylvania. And then it was used in more of a human rights based way. At the national scale, countries have these provisions. They show up at different points in time. Again, going back to the US, Pennsylvania's had one since 1970. New York added one to its constitution in 2021. So 50-year gap in environmental rights protections in the Constitution. It doesn't mean those states weren't doing stuff to prevent environmental harm or potentially enhance environmental harm in some way, shape, or form over those time. It's just once you put it into your Constitution, it gives you a little bit of a different lever to do stuff. So again, that's just the US. In the national scale, countries have these, they add them at different points in time. Countries have pollution levels. Countries are at different points of economic development. Countries have different respect for the rule of law. The idea that people believe in their own legal system and think they can use it is different across countries. And so in order to understand how the constitutions affect environmental outcomes like pollution levels, or you could use like so carbon dioxide emissions per capita, for example, or you could think about, there's like some indices out there like the Sustainable Development Index or the Environmental Policy Index, how the provisions affect these scores or these pollution levels, you also have to control for some of the things you said, like your economic growth, your policy, your rule of law. And then it quantitatively becomes difficult because the provision enters the Constitution and then it just lives there for decades, or it's 5 years old in one country, 50 years old in another country. And a lot of stuff happens over time, and the ability to think about how that provision itself affects pollution within your own country across 50 years is not easy, because lots of things change in 50 years. And the ability to isolate the effect of the provision on the outcome is really quantitatively difficult without having like a variable that is like, here's how the provision was interpreted every single year. That data doesn't exist. So there are fancy methods you can use. And the Reader's Digest version of all that is that after you control for a bunch of stuff we mentioned, having a provision is generally associated with improved environmental outcomes, right? So whether that means the country is using it to take steps to improve the environment, whether people in the country are using the Constitution to sue or to hold the government accountable, like all the avenues you could or couldn't think about, it could be any of them or it could be one of them. It's having a contribution. And that has held across a couple of papers of mine, different data sets, different periods of time, different methods. But again, going through, I'm always very careful because it's a quantitative result that is very much tethered to the data and the time period you're using. But other folks have done this in different disciplines and find similar things with less extensive techniques than economists use. And that's the sum of it. I mean, they do seem to matter. And then whether you have it or not matters. How strong the language of the provision tends to matter. So colleagues and I coded the language for like how strong the language is for a legal sense. How strong the language is, better impact on the environment, reduction in carbon dioxide emissions or improvement in those environmental policy indices. And then another thing was it matters if you have substantive rights, like the right to clean air, and then procedural rights, the right to participate in environmental decisions. Like if you have just one of these, it's a lesser effect than if you have both of them. So the procedural right help the substantive right.
Hello, everyone. This is Justin Cobb, and that was Dr. Chris Jeffords. I am so grateful he came on to the show to share more about his upbringing and his career, what inspired him to not only become an economist, but also how he became involved in green, sustainable economics. It's pretty cool. I'll go ahead and leave a link to his profile in the comments section. You can learn more about him that way. Thank you, audiences, for tuning in to Insight. It means the world. Don't forget to subscribe and help us build this channel. Be sure to give us a like and comment. Let us know what you think. Don't forget to share insights with your family members, your peers, whoever. And don't forget to check us out on our other formats. We are available on Medium and on Spotify. There are exclusive insights there that you will not find anywhere else. Thank you for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for more insights.